Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Cesar Carino, your host, and today we have some special guests, the 50th anniversary class of 1949. And I'm going to introduce them. Of course, everyone knows them. This is Nancy Irwin. I still call her Nancy Irwin, although it's Nancy Adams now.
Right.
And I won't call you by your maiden name. Is that okay, Ed? Ed Caleb and Glenn Herger. Now, this is not the entire class. You have more people than this in your class.
Yes.
But you have the same problem that I have in trying to get people on this show. I spend 10 times more effort getting people on the show than it is to interview them. And you probably had the same thing. But I'm so glad that the three of you finally decided to come. I've been after, I shanghaied you several times, Nancy, to see if I can get you up here. And then did you go and Shanghai these other guys?
Yes.
How did you do it? I mean,
I called them up and said we had to be here.
and that was it. That took care of it. Ed, did you respond quickly?
Pretty much so.
Yeah, and what about you, Glenn? Did you?
I was a little hesitant. But the real two people that should be here, who have done a great amount of work on this reunion, are Margaret and Bob Hodges.
And Margaret and Bob, yes, Bob was my neighbor many years ago, about 65, 67
Bob
years.
has everything on his computer.
Right, now where is
it's
Bob? Where are Bob and Margaret Proper?
Yes.
Live next door to Ed.
Live right next door to us.
And why aren't they here today?
Because, do you really want to know?
Yes.
Because they're having a huge garage sale tomorrow and Friday, and they're very tied up.
Oh my heavens.
With their daughter, so.
They need to get those garage sale dates organized differently. We're going to find out who the three of you are, and then we're going to start talking about the class of 1949. And when you're going, well, obviously you're going to have it on graduation day, because that's what the 50th anniversary always does. They always sit with the present graduates and so all that. Nancy, tell us about yourself, where you were born, who your parents were, and siblings, and all of that, your family, and what you've done.
Well, I was born in Cambridge, Ohio.
Right, but not for long. Were you down there?
No, we moved to Wadsworth June 28th of 1938.
1938, so you've been here 61 years.
Right. And
How's that when you're only 50 years old?
I don't know. Doesn't figure. But my mother bought a beauty parlor here in Wadsworth.
And what was the name of that beauty parlor?
Flannery's.
Flannery's Beauty Parlor, and it was here for years
Yes.
and years
Yes.
and years. Who was your mother?
Her name was Bee Green.
Bee Green, and she ran the beauty parlor. I can still remember Flannery's. Tell us where it was geographically, because
It was located over Brenneman's.
right, but
Corner of High and Broad.
Broad, right. And where was it in the
Where
building?
Alsace is now.
Well, they may not be here 50 years from now. So tell us on
to the front
of the building,
facing High Street.
We're facing High Street, and it would be on the northwest corner of the building, right?
Yes.
Northwest corner of the building.
Yeah, the building.
And how big was the beauty shop? And tell us what you remember about the beauty shop.
Oh, I
itself.
remember lots because I did a lot of work there.
How big was it?
I think she had probably 4 hair dryers.
And describe the hair dryers then as compared to the hair dryers today.
It looked like
Glenn, you remember those hair dryers of you when you used to get your hair
they
done,
were
don't you?
humongous. They were humongous. And I think the permanent wave machine was the funniest, because that was really put these rods on, and then they clamped down on you, and they had all these strings coming, and it was just
Nancy, who were the women who worked in the besides your mom?
You know, I'm not really sure. She had a couple different operators, but the war came and she couldn't keep anyone. Everyone went to war work, and that's why she finally sold the shop.
Why did she pick Flannery's? That name has always
Well, that was what it was named, evidently.
Right.
The original
Before she got there,
yeah,
that's
before
right.
she got there. And then
And who owned Flannery's before your mother had it?
a gal by the name of Flannery.
Yeah.
Let me think. What was her first name? I used to know it. And she sold it to Hortense Gruber from Sharon Center.
Hortense Gruber.
Gruber, I think it was Gruber, and that's who bought it after And I think Hortense is the one that then closed the shop. I don't think after.
I see. Now, we want to come back to those kinds of things because
Yeah.
those are the things we don't have any history at all about, the beauty shops and things of this nature. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll go to Ed, and then by
Well, I
the time
started
we
this-
get to Glenn, he'll be awake.
Okay. I started the school here in the 2nd grade and went all through high school and been here ever
Which
since.
school?
Lincoln.
Lincoln School.
Good old Lincoln School.
And they're going to tear that down now.
Yes, they
and
are.
so the history knows this is 1999, and this is the last year for Lincoln School to be alive.
Right.
They're going to build a new school. They're going to build a new school in Franklin as well. I'm trying to get Irv Felix on the program. Irv Felix was the first person to walk through Franklin School in 1915 when it opened.
Oh, my.
And Irv is not too easy to get a hold of in terms of coming up here. I've called him on the telephone, and there's not been an answer, but I'm going to try to go down and see him. I've known Irv for many years, and most of you know Irv Felix as well. I want to come back to you in a second. Let's go to, no, wait, we have some more who is your father?
Bill Green. Bill used to play the piano professionally. He was also a salesperson full-time, but he played part-time as a piano player. A lot of people
And where
know
did he
him.
play?
Played at the Blue Onion.
He played the Blue Onion?
Yeah, he played in Akron at the Mayflower Hotel. He played all over the area.
Good pianist.
Yes, he was.
Okay, but did you learn to play the piano from him?
No.
No? Yeah.
I can't even carry a tune.
Can't carry a tune. Well, you don't have to. You just use your
Yeah,
fingers for the
I don't
piano.
do that either.
And then we'll come back to your later life a little bit later on. Ed, tell us about your birth and who your parents were, what your mother did and father did, and all those kinds of things. Oh, sisters and brothers.
Only child.
Only baby. Next.
Only child.
Well, I was born on a farm outside of Marshallville, Ohio, and was born in, of course, 1931. And my mom and dad lost the farm during the Depression, and in 1936, in April, we moved to Wadsworth.
And where did you live where did you live, Nancy, in Wadsworth?
Corner of Beck and Prospect, West
Beck and
Prospect.
Prospect. Okay, now how about you?
We were practically neighbors because we lived
Yeah.
on West Prospect. That's
Yeah.
where I grew up. And Dad moved here because he took a job with Smith Dairy
Dairy.
that had just purchased Wadsworth Pure Milk Company. Wadsworth Pure Milk Company had
Where
a
was
predecessor
Where was Smith Dairy at that time?
on Wautroosa.
Wautroosa. And why was it called Wautroosa?
Don't have the answer to that. I don't know.
There's it's a combination of several names, and the word Wautroosa came out of that combination. Who was in charge of the Smith Dairy at the time that your father was there?
Well, Ira Schaup
Schaup.
was the son-in-law of Grace Schmid, whose father and brother owned Smith Dairy.
Smith Dairy.
Their name actually was Schmid,
Schmid.
but they went by Smith.
Made by Smith. And Smith Dairy is also in Orville at the time, was
That's
it not?
right. That was the headquarters.
The Smith Dairy opened in Wadsworth what year?
I'm going to say the year that we moved here, which was 1936.
1936, right. And the Wadsworth Pure Milk Company was one of 11 or 12 or 15 dairies. And the reason they had those dairies was scattered throughout the entire city. I have to keep my hands down because it bothers the camera. The reason they had those dairies scattered throughout the city was that there was no refrigeration. So the farmers would take their milk to these various dairies, and then they would distribute it very, very quickly. You notice that milk was always delivered in the morning because that's when it was the coldest, and then it was up to the individual to keep it cold. And your mother was?
My mother was Grace Kalem, and
her maiden name?
Maiden name was Troyer.
Troyer.
And
Now, we had Troyers in Wadsworth. Were they related?
no relation.
The Barb Troyer, remember Barb Troyer?
No,
She was behind us
no
in school.
relation.
Pardon me?
She was behind us a year or
Yes,
two
right.
in school.
And my mom and dad met while my dad was firing up the stove in a one-room schoolhouse that Mother taught in. She was a school teacher.
And where was this?
Somewhere in the Canal Fulton area, and I am not
Mother
certain.
was out there going to be teaching, and in came the man to fire up the stove in the one-room schoolhouse.
And I guess we might say the romance was fired up.
The romance was fired up, and this was before the kids got there.
Oh yes, oh yes.
And in those days, school teachers were not permitted to show emotion or affection or anything like that. So they probably had to do it by letter, didn't they?
I don't know really how that all worked out.
They won't tell you either.
Not now.
No, they're both gone. And how about your siblings?
Well, I had an older sister, Marilyn,
Marilyn.
who also went to Wadsworth and graduated in 1946.
Right.
She is deceased in 1984. And I have a younger brother who also went through Wadsworth, Gene, and he's living in now in Delaware. But,
Whom did Marilyn marry?
a gentleman by the name of Watts, and she met him in Washington,
Yeah,
D.C., where she
he was not a
No.
Wadsworth person.
And they lived on the West Coast.
West Coast, right. We knew Marilyn very well, of course, and it's very sad when she died because, our group dying away makes us all very sad. We were a very closely knit group of people in Wadsworth High School.
Well, we were a
particularly those-
small group, and that made us closer.
Oh, you bet. And, that was our world. Our whole world was right there. And it's one of the things that I'm so pleased about with Wadsworth is the fact that there are so many wonderful relationships that have, and as a matter of fact, you're going to be telling me some marriages that happened within your classes as well. Glenn, we'll come to you in a couple seconds more because we have to get more of the details about what you people did from 1937 to 1949. But in the meantime, Glenn, how about telling us a little bit about yourself? Now, we had you on as a regular person just by yourself for the Herger family. Correct. About a year ago or so.
Yes.
But if you have, if you've forgotten to tell us anything bad, I'd like to have you here. Tell us something bad today.
Well, I can't remember anything bad at the moment.
Nor can anyone else.
I think.
No. Right, Nancy?
Right.
No one else can remember anything bad about Glenn.
No.
St. Glenn Herger. Tell us a little about your mother and father.
I was born in Wadsworth Township on Reimer Road, just west of Stony Ridge, which is sort of a landmark.
What side of the road? North or south?
On the north side,
North side
just
of the
west of Stony Ridge.
Just west. And tell us where Stony Ridge is and how it got its name.
Stony Ridge is about 2 miles west of Clark's Corners and got its name largely because of a large outcropping of sandstone that created a ridge there.
But they had to go through the ridge to make the road, right?
Yes.
Yes. Do you remember that?
In 1937 or 38, I think, they
WPA.
changed the road. It used to go around to the south side of the ridge, and then a WPA project changed the road and it went through and filled in some small valleys, so it made the road much safer.
Yes. 1937. You
Somewhere in
remember
there.
it, don't you?
Yes, I remember
What
that.
do you remember most about Stony Ridge being made into the road?
Oh, I think I related some of this perhaps in the last program that I was on, but
Nancy doesn't remember it, though.
No, I don't.
Sunday afternoons were always a time for exploration in the neighborhood, and my brother Fred and I usually wound up going up on the ridge and hunting for blasting cap wire that was used to set off the detonations for blasting the stone out of the hill. And
Now, just for the record, that's probably the meanest thing that
He's ever
Glenn
done.
ever did, was to go and look for blasting cap wires.
Well, it
Now,
depends on what he did with it after he found it.
Well, there's nothing you can do with
it's
blasting cap
amazing what you
wires.
could do with little pieces of wire in those days.
Glenn, you
Those were our
mentioned Fred.
toys.
He was one of four, one of three other brothers, but one of four of you. Who are the other two?
My oldest brother's name is Dale. He's lived in the area all his life until he retired from PPG and moved to Texas. My second brother has never come back to the area since he left high school. Earl lives in Billings, Montana now. And my third brother, Fred, has took a job with Dow Chemical and has lived in Midland, Michigan since then.
Well, the whole family has really prospered well intellectually, and as far as building your status and everything else, it's just a wonderful family. Well, all of you, man, we couldn't have picked three nicer people here to typify the class of 1949. Typically, we have the females around here who come up with all the little details, and the fellows will, oh, that's right, that's right. Now, you're not going to get away with that this time. We're going to depend upon Nancy to give us some of those little details. But if one of you happens to say, oh, that's right, without adding something to it, Nancy,
They're in trouble.
they're in trouble.
Okay.
When's the first time that you met all of these people? What did you remember when you first met Ed Calum, for instance. What about
I
you?
don't remember first meeting him. We just went to school.
That's,
We just went to school.
that pretty well takes care of your ego for the day.
It was just seemed like he's always been there.
Always been there. That's right. We never met anyone. We just
think
became-
everyone was just
they
always
became.
there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Who were some of the kids you played with when you were
Margaret Proper Hodges,
right? Who was
Barb Freeman Dutt, Joyce
Barb Freeman Fish Dutt?
Fish Dutt, Joyce Markison. Where's Joyce live now?
New Mexico.
New Mexico.
Mexico.
Yeah, she doesn't get back to see us. Jill Lar Reese. Who else do we play? Lavon Stonebrook,
Levon Strumbrook.
Judy Burse,
Judy Burse.
Suzanne Reimer.
Suzanne Reimer.
Who else was there? There was a bunch of us. Mim Bowers,
Em Bowers.
Dorothy Gibbs.
Dorothy Gibbs.
Who am I forgetting?
Phyllis Roy.
Phyllis Rohr. That's
Wow.
another one.
You mean to tell me that
Joanne Clements.
Joanne Clements, Broad Street.
And we all ran as a bunch. I mean, it wasn't so much one-on-one.
Kind of a pack.
Yeah, we ran as a pack.
Tell us, were there any males in this group? Not at that point.
Not at that point.
Later on.
Yeah, later on.
Later on.
Yeah.
How about the kids you played with?
Well, I remembered, of course, Bob Schaefer and I started in kindergarten
Yeah.
together, so Bob and I were good friends.
We're sitting on the Schaefer property as we.
I realize that. And a young man by the name of Bob Delcor, who did not finish school
didn't
here.
stay with us
He
very
was
long.
in grade school. And quite frankly, some of the others,
Bill Crumley lived down
Bill
there by
Crumley,
us.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Bill and
Crumley.
Jim.
See, I told you the Nancy would come up with all these details. And don't agree, then maybe you have to tell us something different now.
Bill was one, and trying to think, I think Chuck Rayner was around at that time too.
Yeah, Chuck was from Overlook Avenue.
Yeah. The Horners, didn't the Horners live over on Party Street?
Which Horners would that
Oh,
be?
which one would that have been?
Bob Horner?
Earl, Donna.
Earl Horner?
Yes,
No, Earl
yeah,
Horner?
Earl and
yeah,
Donna.
I
yeah.
thought that Earl Horner was decentralized.
Oh, they lived on the corner of
No, they lived on the
Stevenson and
corner of
Party.
Stevenson and Party, so they would have been, but he was a year ahead of me.
That's right, because we started centralized together.
I had a good friend who was a year behind me, and we were good friends at Lincoln, Roger Johnston.
Yes,
who
Roger Johnston,
graduated
same
in the class of 50.
He was blonde fellow,
Right, right.
baby face, but just the nicest guy in the world.
Wonderful guy. And we were very good friends because we were just neighbors 2 doors apart, as well as being school chums. So I really don't remember us. These are very many more of the boys that.
Well, if you think for a little while, Nancy will come up with them.
I remember some of the girls that she's.
Oh, well, how about some of the girls then?
Well, I can pretty much just say the list that she's given. I remember all of them and being there at school.
And at that time at Lincoln, they probably didn't have more than 15 or 16 girls, did you?
I don't remember.
I mean,
Lloyd Maxon. Lloyd lived down there
Lloyd
too.
was-
Lloyd
Lloyd
Maxon.
Maxon wasn't a girl, though. He was a boy.
Yeah, he was a boy,
He
but he
would
was
have been
one
another one
in the
class.
neighborhood, kind of
Lloyd
neighborhood.
Maxon.
I
So
remember all the teachers, but I have trouble remembering.
let us have those.
Well, we started out in kindergarten with Miss Wells.
Everyone had Miss Wells.
Never will forget her because I couldn't tie my shoe when I went to school, and I asked her one day to tie my shoe, and she said, "If you're in kindergarten, you're tying your own shoe."
Right, so you make two
And
rabbit
I
ears
tied
and tie
my
them
shoes
together.
from that day. And then in first grade, we had Alice Lieberth, who
Lieberth,
at that
now
time
gone.
was
Moffat.
Moffat. And second grade was Portia
Snyder.
Snyder Moon.
Snyder.
Portia
Moon
Snyder, right.
She was Miss Moon. And in third grade, we had Liberta Coleman Lee.
Coleman Lee.
Fourth grade, if I'm remembering right, was Gladys Oles, was it not?
She was music teacher, wasn't
But I
she?
thought she taught fourth grade.
I don't remember.
Fifth grade was Mary Sample, and I always remember Mary.
Yeah.
What a
She
wonderful,
was a good
wonderful
teacher.
person she was.
Everyone loved Mary
She was a
Samples.
good teacher.
Scared me to death with when she'd give you the big eyes, but boy, she was a wonderful
Good teacher.
And sixth grade was Earl
Earl
Joachim,
Joachim. Everyone had him.
who later on became a very close personal friend as I grew into adulthood. And we,
You know, he was a good friend of
attended,
all of ours.
attended the same church, and marvelous person.
Earl was the dean of principals at that time, and we all had 2 or 3 deans of principals at that time that just were outstanding. And another one, well, there are several, but I mean, the ones that we remember would be Mr. Holcomb, who we remember as well, Ray Holcomb, and Earl Joachim. They were around for, they made a lot of difference to a lot of kids. They're just great people.
And
And they were there for a long time.
Well,
They didn't move around.
they stayed
Stayed
there.
put.
They were born there.
Yeah, and they just stayed
And
put.
they died. Well, Earl's gone, and they died here.
When my eldest child started to school, Earl was still principal at
Yeah.
Lincoln, and that's where I started her. And I walked in, I remember he said to me, "Oh my gosh, another generation."
Another generation, right? And that was what 45 years ago.
45 years ago,
Yeah.
I'm sure, yeah.
So-
And as he and Helen had children, I somehow became their babysitter. I used to babysit for all three of their boys.
That was a good thing.
Yeah.
Now let's go to another school, which we centralized, and tell us who some of the friends were that you remember, because these all amalgamated them when they came to the 10th grade.
Of course, in our area, the students were more scattered.
Oh, yes, as a matter of fact, if you wanted to play with someone, you'd have to make a day trip out of it.
Almost.
Well, from the center of centralized school to the farthest most point was 5 miles. So we had people within a 5-mile radius of Wadsworth who were all friends of ours.
Right, and I can remember Leo Smith.
The Leatherman Road, way out there.
Yes. Eugene Silchuk down on
The Seville Road, way down there.
And of course, I guess we didn't really stick to our own classmates either.
No, you couldn't, because you didn't have
It was
that.
just too far.
Yeah.
And we didn't run everywhere at that time.
You
like
didn't
the
go anywhere at
car.
all.
But there were neighborhood,
And who were some of the neighborhood kids?
the Ellabrook family.
Ellabrook, Bob Ellabrook, George
And,
Ellabrook.
Then there was Fayette Robinson that lived to the west of us.
Yeah.
On the Long Farm. They rented a house on the farm.
And the Longs was John Long.
Yes.
And Mary Long Greiner.
Right. And then, that's about all I can think of.
How about the Plums?
No, John Plum in
John
later
Plum.
years, yeah. They
Yeah.
lived on Bear Swamp for a while, and then on Reimer Road after that for quite a while. And that was more in junior high and high school that they were in the area.
And John was president of our class.
John Plum was president of your class?
That's right.
What happened to John Plum?
He is living over in Akron. They've lived in a condominium on what they call Timber Top.
Timber Top, it's, in the valley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coming out of the valley, going up on, what would that be?
Portage.
Portage Trail.
Portage
And that's the
Trail.
road area over in there
Off
somewhere.
Portage Trail.
Off Portage Trail.
Yeah.
Mhm. And he, interestingly enough, John Plum opened up his own plumbing business. He was
Yes.
a plumber for many, many years. And,
John Plum, the plumber.
and is now, of course, retired, and his wife is retired as well.
Did he marry Wadsworth girl?
No, he married a girl from the Akron area, and Eshelman was her name.
Eshelman. I don't know that name.
No.
Akron. And who were some of the people that you remember at Isham who were ahead of you? Now watch this, people. This is going to be a trick question.
Who were ahead of me?
Yes.
Well, my brothers.
Hit that one on the head.
Yeah.
Anybody else, Glenn?
You mean students or teachers?
There's students,
Students.
yeah. Mhm.
Oh, I remember Caesar Cream.
There you go.
All right, that's what you were waiting for.
I have woke up.
You remember Caesar Carino. What do you remember about Caesar Carino as a little boy?
Well, I remember Caesar Carino and Ralph and Julie Desonale from the Silver Creek area.
That's
and
right.
I don't know why the two of them, or three of them, stuck in my mind.
Because
as
we're the
being-
only ones from the Silver Creek area.
Okay.
We were the farthest east end of the community. You were at the farthest north end, almost the farthest north end. No, it was the
Northwest.
farthest north end, yeah.
Northwest corner.
Yeah, and Silchuks would be the farthest southwest corner.
Southwest.
And whom else did you mention a moment ago?
Leo Smith.
Leo Smith would be the farthest western portion. Well, not really,
Not
because
quite,
they would go out farther to Blake Road.
Yeah. There was another boy that went to centralized, but then dropped out in later years, was Walter Perry. And he
Yes,
lived on
yes.
State Route 57 on one of the Raleigh Obel farms.
Raleigh Obel had many
Has
pieces of
a number
property.
of
Yeah,
farms along State Route 57 between River Styx and Wadsworth.
that's right, exactly. Who's your bus driver?
Started out with Charlie Cooter.
Who was your neighbor?
Beg
Who
pardon?
was a neighbor?
Yeah, really.
Yeah, he lived up there on the
Mile
Abbott
east
farm.
of us. Mhm.
On the east of the Abbott farm, which is now what, dental's, what's on that farm now? Is that where the dental,
No,
family
it's
dental?
west of where the dental clinic is.
But that'll be the Low Med?
No, it's west of there yet. The Low Med is on the property.
Oh, the
where
farm is west of there.
Yeah.
Right, okay, then there's a housing development there.
Yes,
yeah,
part of it.
And Nancy
part
would
of
know
it
because
is-
she sold many of the houses in that
Not
area.
in that area so
Not in
much.
that area?
No, we-
Sterling Oaks area is off
Yeah.
of that farm.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Who then followed Charlie Cooter? We had Charlie Cooter on the program. He's now 99 years old.
I saw that program.
His wife was.
He was interesting, too.
Oh,
His
extremely.
wife was a school teacher,
His
wasn't
wife
she?
was my school teacher. Yeah, she was
Yeah.
everyone's school
We
teacher.
had
My
her for a
neighbor,
substitute at one point.
I don't
in high-
remember
in
her.
high school or junior high.
I don't remember her.
rest her soul, she was a very, very fine teacher, but tough. Oh, mercy, was she tough. I mean, there was no one, absolutely no one.
Oh,
who
Glenna
practiced law.
Lobenthal.
Yeah, Glenna Lobenthal. The difference is that Glenna Lobenthal.
Had a sense of humor.
Yeah, well, Mary Louise Cooter loved her dearly, and she was an excellent. Did you remember her as a
No, I
teacher?
didn't.
I don't
Excellent
remember
teacher.
her.
But oh, she carried herself with a dignity that every teacher ought to carry herself with, really, because it instilled a respect instantly. There was no question about who was in charge of the classroom when Mary Louise Cooter was there. She was Mary Louise Abbott. The Abbott farm was up there. Right. And who followed Charlie Cooter?
I think I had Harry Leatherman for a year or two.
Harry Leatherman from Southville Road.
Yes.
And Betty Lou Leatherman's, it was Robert Leatherman was,
No, it was Betty Lou.
Betty Lou Leatherman's father, right, yeah.
And then a brother to Ray, who was...
That's right. Ray was one I was thinking
Yeah.
of. That's right.
And then Lloyd Farnsworth drove for a number of years.
Lloyd Farnsworth.
Yes.
And that would be the father of
Esta Farnsworth, or not the father.
Father-in-law.
Wife, or husband.
Husband, there we go. Okay, yeah.
And they lived just to the east of us, and neighbor.
Yeah. Going to go back to some real authorities here, Nancy. What was the amalgamation like when the centralized kids and the Franklin kids and the kids from Central and then from your people from what was it like? Tell us the differences and dynamics in your friendships and so forth. You came. We'll start with you. You came from Lincoln, and then you went to 7th grade at
junior high.
the junior
Yeah.
high or Central.
Yeah.
And at that time, the people also came in from Franklin. Now you had 3 different schools melding at that point.
Into the one.
Now
yes.
tell us about the different dynamics. What happens there?
I don't remember anything in particular. Everyone was just excited. It was just, we all got together, and I don't remember that there was any great big.
Did you change friendships? Did you
Some, yes.
Who were some of the
I
friendships?
think we broadened our
Broadened
friendship.
your friendships.
Yeah.
And who were some of the ones with whom you broadened?
Like Bonnie Miller.
Bonnie Miller from?
I think she came from Franklin.
She came from
Franklin.
That would be Perry Miller's
Daughter, or sister.
sister, and
Yes.
she married Leo Smith.
Yes, and she's married to Leo.
I think they had 8 children
Nick
afterwards.
Burliak.
Nick Burliak from down there.
He came. I'm trying to think who all came from. Boy, that goes back a long ways. I don't remember that there was anything negative. Everything was positive. Everyone was.
Oh, yes. No, there was no-
real big positive, and everyone was so glad to meet all these new people.
New boyfriends and new
Oh,
girlfriends
yeah.
and all those other kinds of things.
And of course, we were a small town then.
Very small. In
Yeah.
1947, 48, 49 rather, we had not begun to grow.
No, we were still a small community.
About 5, 6, 7,000 people.
And some of these kids, I guess I already knew, maybe from swimming lessons or scouting or something like that. So some of them we had already met.
Now, from a boy's point of view, and at this point we're getting to that's a girl and that's a boy stage. You knew what girls were and knew what boys were. How did you assimilate? And then when we got to Glenn, he waited until he was a fully grown man before he was assimilated because he was a 10th grader.
I'm like Nancy. I don't remember any real negative details at all about that. It just seemed like it was a natural course of events that you looked forward to. You knew that you were going to.
And who were some of the
middle
new
school.
friends that you made?
Well, John Plum, for one.
John Plum
was
from Centralized.
Yeah, John, and became a very close friend of mine, and all through junior high and particularly high school. And of course, when Glenn came along, I considered Glenn a good friend, and there were many who we met from.
Roger Bishop. Where did Roger live?
Roger, they came much later. They came when he was in the 10th grade because his father became the minister of the Acme Jerusalem Lutheran
he
Church.
was in our class.
Roger and Loyal.
And I
Father's name is
remember
Glenn Bishop.
people from the Franklin area, like Sam Sorrentino.
Sam Sorrentino, right.
People like that. But I found in thinking back about it, I don't remember any difficulty in assimilating it all. It was, as I said, it was an exciting thing to move from the grade school to the middle school. Of course, we called it junior
High at that time.
At that
I still
time.
called it junior high.
And,
I do too. That dates us.
I think we all had the same fears. Getting to our lockers on time, and then from the locker back. The 7th graders always had a run. Everybody
right.
else was strolling, but we thought we had a run, so we'd make it on
time. Then you
Find the right room.
And Nancy, your comment about that dates us. Some of the older people, when I tell them they have to meet at the high school, they say, "Now which one? The new high school or the old high school?"
Right.
Which of course is no longer in existence. We have the central school, we have the high school and the new school. Glenn, you came at grade 10, right?
Yes.
By that time, I mean, you probably had established some relationships of your own, and more than likely, it was a little bit more difficult to make a different kind of relationships with other people. Did that ever pose a problem with you, or do you feel that, as these do, that just went with the flow?
I would agree with the other two that you just went with the flow. I knew some of the students from church affiliation. At that time I went to Trinity, United Church of Christ, and so I knew probably half a dozen or more of the people that were in our class.
And who were some of those that you really knew from Trinity?
Dan Welsing.
Dan Welsing.
Suzanne Reimer.
Suzanne Reimer. Bill Reimer's sister.
Then Miriam Bowers.
Miriam Bowers. Now, which Bowers was this? So we get them.
Harry.
Harry Bowers, right. Yeah. And which one it is, but we want to make sure we get the right Bowers people.
And Dorothy Gibbs.
Dorothy Gibbs, tall, thin.
Forgive me if I forgot some others.
we will forgive. Now, what about new friends that you made from Centralized? With whom did you come as a strong friendship alliance from Centralized and then came up here, and what broadening did you do?
Well, a number of the friends that I had at Centralized went into different programs. I went into college prep classes, and some of them went into print shop.
And who were some of those?
I think Leo Smith went into print shop.
Print shop.
And I'm not real sure of that, but I think, and some of the others took other courses. So
Machine shop, we had print shop, machine shop, and the home ec.
Home ec. And so some of the friendships kind
And
of got...
occupational department
right.
at that time.
Yeah. But some of the new friendships were Ed and Nancy and all the group that was involved in the same classes pretty much.
Now here comes all my faces are going to be red on this one. Who were the heartthrobs?
Roger Bishop, probably.
Yeah.
After he got here, he was.
I was going to
and his
mention
brother.
Roger. I remember, and I'd forgotten this, when he came to town. I think he came apparently in the middle of the year.
He did.
Because I remember being called to the office by Mr. Work, which anybody that had Mr. Work as a principal, when you were called to the office, you went very quickly and were wondering what was going to happen.
Yeah, no,
I had
everything was all
the
right.
greatest respect for this gentleman.
Oh, he's a wonderful person.
Wonderful person. But anyway, I remember being called to the office, and what it was to introduce Roger to me. He had just moved in, and he was to be my locker partner. And so that's how I got to know Roger, and probably knew him a little better because of that relationship.
And Roger and Loyal were just super kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely outstanding kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were.
They assimilated instantly throughout the community. Of course, Nancy, you have the secret there. They were the heartthrobs, right?
Well, I was just trying to think, who.
And what about, now Roger was not your heartthrobs, but who were the heartthrobs among the women? Girls, I guess we called them that those days.
Carol Cyberly.
I
Carol
was
Cyber.
Carol.
just going to say Carol would have been
Yeah,
one.
she was a nice girl, too.
Sweetheart of a girl.
For me personally, one of my heartthrobs was one of my teachers, Ivy
Nichols.
No.
Gehring.
Gehring,
And,
right. She's in a rest home now.
Yes.
And I saw her not too long ago. She's doing quite well. Still sharp.
She was at our
Last reunion.
45th reunion and enjoyed it immensely. And
She had a presence that could, and I can understand what you're saying. She had the presence that would make her a heartthrob, and yet she had the presence of a highly, highly structured professional, where there was no question about where the lines were.
But she had a soft side to her.
Oh, she does. Beautiful
Yeah.
soul.
and
Very soft.
we were her first class in Wadsworth in the 7th grade.
And she was teaching Latin
she
at
was
the time?
Yes.
No, she was teaching geography.
Geography at the time.
And at that time, but then later on, those of us who took Latin, I was one, had her
So
for
did I.
Latin.
Yeah.
And
Good teacher. Boy,
Marvelous.
you just take
Marvelous.
people like that and where are they? Why don't we have them again? Of course, there are some very good teachers now, but I mean, those were outstanding teachers. How about Glenn? You're going to tell us about the heartthrobs, and you told about Carol
mentioned
Simon.
one.
Carol Simon. She was
She wasn't my heartthrob, but
well, everyone's heartthrob. I mean, she's kind of a community heartthrob. I mean, she was a very.
She was just
what
a
about
nice
Annette?
girl.
What was Annette's last name? It was in your class.
She wasn't in our class.
Yeah.
Booth.
Booth. What was
Annette
she?
Booth.
Was she behind you?
Where was Annette? She wasn't with us very long.
I don't
She
remember.
moved, I think, in the 10th, 11th grade or something.
Yeah, she wasn't with us very long. Annette
Very,
Booth.
very nice girl, a very attractive girl, all that. Now, let's go to some of the things that aren't so, here, boys, my face red on this one. What about some of the things that you people did as a class, or so you knew that someone did as a class, that 50 years later you can laugh at, but at the time, wow.
Well, let's see.
We may have painted the soldier, or whatever that statue is at the cemetery. Everyone did that every year, though. They
Yeah.
moved it from the square down to the cemetery. We may have painted that.
That's where.
May have done that, I don't know.
One of the reasons I'm asking the question is that I asked this to the last year's group too, which was my own class, because I was trying to think of what kinds of things that we did that were devilish. And we didn't.
We didn't.
We didn't do anything that was really, we didn't. I mean, I couldn't think of anything, and no one else could think of anything. I'm asking the same question this year because I think that probably as bad as society thought we were because we were young kids and so forth, I don't think we really did anything bad, and I know that our class did, and I don't think that your class did particularly.
Initiation. Do you remember when we used to initiate the
Yes.
freshmen? And your class was the last one to get to do it.
We were the last class to be initiated. I
Oh,
was gonna say that.
boy, and I was scared to death
They-
of that.
Something happened, I'm not sure what it was, but they decided that
Well,
it was
someone
not-
got tied to a tombstone
Yeah,
and
that's
left,
right.
and someone got
Somebody-
carried out of town and
They
left.
just
and-
decided it was going to stop, and we were the last class to have
Yes.
it. We were also the last class to have a hayride.
And what about the last
Because-
class for a kid party? Did you have the kid party?
Yes, we did have a kid party.
Our hayride ended up with one of our wagons flipping over, and happened to be Ivy was on that. Ivy Nichols was a chaperone that night, and she got thrown off. But nobody was hurt seriously, but they said that's the last hayride.
That was it.
That was it.
That was it. And where was the hayride, and who's driving the tractor?
I don't
Glenn, do
remember.
you remember that?
No.
We had two wagons. I was on one that did not
Where were
flip,
they?
but
Where were they?
I don't remember.
I don't
We were
remember.
on the road. We were not on fields.
No, you were on the road,
We
yes.
were actually
I don't
on the
even
road.
remember where we went.
But
do
I don't
you?
remember.
I don't either.
No.
No one remembers.
I don't remember.
Now,
I remember that initiation,
now
though.
I'm going to ask the embarrassing red-faced question. Why doesn't anyone remember where you went on that hayride?
Or maybe we were busy. I don't know. I don't
I
remember.
can't recall.
No one can recall.
Too many years have
Too
passed.
many years of time. You remember other things that happened back then. Why can't you remember where you went on that hayride?
Don't remember.
Now, your children and your grandchildren, I think, just of mine. father and my grandfather, and they can't remember what they did in the harem. Wow. And here they come so piously and tell us what we should and should not do. Who had cars in those days? What kids had cars in those days?
Well, I remember Bob Schaefer had certainly access to
Had access to a car. Did you
I
have
had access to
You
a
had an
car.
access to a car.
We used to
Drive it to school?
No.
No. Bob Schaefer drive it to school?
I don't
Now
remember him
and then.
driving to school, but maybe he did. But we certainly spent a lot of time after scouting meetings and so forth, and we had a couple of herring trips that, frankly, if my son had done the same thing, I probably wouldn't have been very happy
Oh,
about.
let's hear about those now. Come on. What were they like?
Well, we had a friend in the class behind us who got behind the wheel one night and decided he'd try out the speed of Bob's Packard, and
Which,
We were-
incidentally, could be excessive.
yes, and we were coming down 261, and if you know where the intersection is now there, that they have a light. I don't even remember if there was a light at that point, but he didn't even slow down for the intersection and just made a real sharp turn to go down High Street and nearly tipped the car over. And those of us who were in the car were hanging on for dear life, but that was something, by the way, that I didn't share with my parents at the time.
I'm sure you would.
And I talked to my son and daughter about it.
Don't
but
you ever do that?
And those are back in the drag racing days. I can remember
Yeah.
drag racing.
You remember drag racing?
Oh, yeah, and they were scared to death of me. They thought I was crazy. I always won.
Tell us about drag racing. That's something that kids don't do anymore, I don't think.
Oh, you get caught doing that now, and you're in a heap of trouble.
What
It's
did you do
juvenile
in
court.
drag?
They built a new road into Oroville, and that road was wonderful for drag racing.
Tell us how you did it.
You start from a stop and go for so many feet, and whoever hit the line that they had determined was going to be, that was the winner.
And you won every time.
Oh, they were scared of me. I was nuts. They were afraid I'd run into them, I guess.
Side by side, right?
Yeah, it might be 3 of us lined up.
And cars coming the other direction?
Well, there could be. There could be.
But there never were. Otherwise, we'd be here to tell it. One of our persons, and I won't mention his name right now, although he said it right on the air. This would have been in the teens, 20s maybe, 20s I guess it would be, or maybe even, no, it have to be the 30s because they had a 1931 Ford. Went out to the 3C Highway, and 3C Highway, of course, is Route 3. How many miles from the center of town? 7, 8?
Probably.
Probably.
Let's say 8 miles from the center of town, west. 2 cars, one lane, one to the other, Model A Fords.
Yeah, I saw
11
that.
o'clock at night. Came all the way up, came to the center of Wadsworth, went around the square on both sides, and went out to the East County Line to 9 Road. That's 3 miles from here, 2 miles from here. It's 3, right?
Probably.
2 miles from here, 2.5. 10 miles, not a car came the other direction. And they would see who would win. They did this time and time again. Now, we can't really say that the kids today are more wild than they were, except that if they did that today, there'd be 14 million cars coming the
yeah.
other direction.
Well, there's more cars on the road,
Right,
too.
and helicopters on top of your car going that direction.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things you remember about, it's starting to come out now. You went around the corner up there at 261 and Main and without stopping, and you drag race down in Oroville. Glenn, go on.
I lived a rather sheltered life.
Shelter life.
I remember Roger Bishop often, if I was in town and needed a ride home, he would take me home.
He'd take you home. But it was a very sensible ride, no doubt.
Well, he lived in Wadsworth at the time.
Yeah, but I mean a sensible ride. He didn't drag
Oh,
race.
yeah, it was.
I mean, Nancy didn't try to drag race him up
No.
to Stony Ridge.
No.
No.
And I don't know, I wasn't involved in a lot of the school activities because when the school was over, well, there were chores to do.
That's
at
right.
home.
That was one of the things that people in centralized. Almost everyone had chores at night. We were not permitted to leave the house, actually, during school nights. And if it happened to be that we would go anywhere on the weekend, it would be with family, But on school nights, absolutely not, nothing. And I can still remember in the 10th, 11th grade, something like that, that we had high Y. And it was almost a federal case that my parents permitted me to go to high Y.
Yeah.
Was anyone else in high Y? Was that
Yes,
you? You were in high Y?
Yes.
Tell us about high Y.
Well, Caesar, I don't remember a lot about it, to be very honest with you. It was an organization that was sponsored, as I recall, by the YMCA.
YMCA and Woodard Huntsberger was the faculty advisor.
But I don't recall a lot of the details. I'm, again, a little foggy on that.
Paul Thomas was
When
president of high Y.
Paul was, yes.
Yeah, oh, I remember Paul.
Paul and I do remember one incident. We went to High Y Camp down at Camp Nelson Dodd, and between our junior and senior year. And Saturday evening was a Vesper time, and we were down on the play areas of the camp, and the cabins were up on a hill. And the signal was given to go to your cabin and prepare for Vespers, and that meant taking a shower and so forth. So I immediately dashed towards the cabin, forgetting that there was a horseshoe court that I was crossing. And someone was throwing a horseshoe and hit me on right here in the head. And I ended up being driven about 12 miles to a little town called Danville.
Danville.
Where a very, very capable woman doctor stitched me up.
Well,
I imagine you said quite a bit of Vespers that
And
night,
I
didn't you?
never will forget when I got off the bus and down in Massillon, my dad met me, and I was all bandaged up, and you know, it wasn't a pretty sight. So, but that's one thing I remember about High Y. But the actual meetings and so forth, I don't remember much.
Well, I remember that. I was secretary treasurer or something, whatever, you know, and and it was I thought it was an extremely good group of people, and all of the tenants were lofty, you know. I guess it had some religious significance, but we didn't
Yes.
particularly talk about that. We're just good people and all that. What about the girls? What did they do? The kids, the girls in your class, what did they do? What did they belong to?
Well, there was GAA.
Girls Athletic Association.
Yeah, I belonged to that. I worked after school.
Where'd you
every day.
work?
I worked in Merriman's record shop.
That's right.
It was a wonderful record shop and quite extensive. You know, they had people from Akron come over because
Yeah, they
it
had
was
a lot
one
of
of
records.
it was one of the biggest shops around.
Tell us about that shop, that record shop.
It was
and
in the
what-
Goodyear store, Merriman's Goodyear store.
Records were how big?
They were 78s.
78s.
I still have some of them.
You still have some of those 78s. And you worked with Opal and
And Opal and Don.
and Don Merriman, who are still living.
Yes, they are.
Don is about 95, 96, and Opal's equally that old, isn't she?
Close to it.
And what about you? Did you work after school?
I did, starting about 1947, I started to work at the LSS Ben Franklin, which
Right.
was down in right
Who else
next to the
worked
First
there?
National Bank. Well, I can tell you a very important
Yes.
person that worked there was my wife.
That's right.
Barb and I met at Ben Franklin in 1947, and
That was it.
at the end of 1950, almost the end, on December 30th, we were married.
Tell us who Barb was.
Barb was, her last name was Reed, R-E-I-D, and she was from what is now the Highland area, but she went to Granger School. And her dad, who had the nickname Hobe, his name was Hubert, also worked for Smith Dairy and was a milk driver, as
I
my
remember
dad
him.
was. He drove for 20 years, and my dad was for 30 years. So we knew each other, Barb and I did, but we really didn't get acquainted until we got into the 5 and 10. So the old song about finding your $1 million baby in a 5 and 10 cent store.
That came out true. That came out true.
But that's where I worked during
Who
school.
were some of the other kids who worked in various stores in town? In your class?
Well, Barb worked at Merriman's
Yeah, Barb-
later
Barb
on.
Fish,
She
Barb-
came into
Barb-
Merriman's later on.
Carol Seiberling
Carol Seiberling.
worked at the Ben Franklin.
Ben Franklin as well.
Rose Davis McGorry worked at the jewelry
Street.
store. No, the jewelry store.
I know
No.
she was from Apple Street.
Yeah, Auble Street. Yeah.
Which jewelry store?
Nielsen's.
Nielsen's deals on the corner of the north, south, west, southeast corner of Broad and Main.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where the jewelry store was.
Mark Nielsen was his name. And he had a son.
Yes.
What was his name?
I don't remember.
He was behind you in school, was
Yes,
he?
and
A
but
year
I
or
should
two.
know because they were very strong members in our church. Oh, what was Mark's son's name? Only had one boy.
One son. That
His
was
wife's name was Jimmy, I can tell you that, but I can't think of the boy's name.
Because there was the jewelry store and there was Ladrick's.
Landers. Right there.
Yeah.
And who were some of the other people who worked in the downtown stores?
Oh, I'm trying to think. In our class, I don't know.
I can't remember, I was just going to say my sister
You worked at the B&B or someplace,
I worked at the
didn't you?
B&B, right.
I remember
sister
that.
worked at Brenny's, but that's not our class.
Yeah.
No, she's a little bit older.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
How about Glenn?
I don't recall.
You
I
worked
think
at
I
home.
had the best job in town.
Best job in
Oh,
town.
I thought it was
Records.
wonderful. And I made 50 cents an hour.
You're lucky. I made 25 cents
I
an hour at
know.
the B&B.
I made more than everyone in town.
That's why you could afford those fast cars.
I won't tell you who they were.
Now, as we got older, we had people in your class who married each other. Who married each other in your class? I'll start it off with the class of 48. Bill Adams and Helen Drollinger married.
Yes. Well, Bonnie
and
Miller
Bob.
and Leo Smith.
Bonnie Miller, Leo Smith.
Yeah.
Bob Hodges and Margaret Proper.
Yes.
Who else?
They're no longer married, but Daryl Slayball and Ramona Medley.
Yes, right.
They were married. Who else? Let me see.
Ramona Medley is a niece of
Felix.
Felix.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Trying to think here.
We just mentioned him, that we want to get him on the program.
I can't recall any,
Carol Cyberly and Roger Dutt were married, but that he was in a different class.
He was
in your class.
He was our class, yeah.
do you remember any, Glenn? I can't
I don't.
remember.
Right. Now,
Those are the only ones I can think of.
Yeah, in our
okay.
class.
Now, who became physicians, who became teachers, who became outstanding businessmen, who became outstanding farmers, who did what?
Well, our outstanding farmer, of course, is Glenn.
Glenn?
No doubt
and,
about that.
Probably,
Joan Bissell also is.
Oh, yeah, she's got a
related
tree
to
farm.
farming. She has a tree farm.
And
she has a tree farm now.
In Cambridge.
Yeah, in Cambridge. She had married a veterinarian. but
Yes.
He's
yes,
gone now too,
yes,
isn't he?
Yeah.
Yes.
But you know, we're going to start making shrines to farmers because they're taking all the farms away. And you're one of the last ones around, and that, boy, that's a serious.
Yes, it is.
Very, very serious.
One of,
You had Paul Townsend, he was the...
Paul Townsend,
Optometrist,
optometrist,
yeah.
right? And what about Gary Bernard? He was 2 years behind
He
you?
was behind us.
Yeah.
One of the my classmates that I learned to know right from the beginning too in kindergarten, forgot about him, and is Jim Blau.
Oh,
Jim
yes.
Blau, yeah, he sang
Yeah.
beautifully.
Yeah.
Jim will be coming to our reunion and was at our last reunion. Jim became very successful with Procter & Gamble.
Right.
And I think
Cincinnati.
his final job with them was an international marketing manager.
Wow.
So he did a very good job. And but Jim was a good friend of mine, and all through, particularly once we got to junior high and high school, we competed academically. And we used to get together and study, and then always wanted to see which one got the highest grade on a test. So we had a lot of fun doing that.
Well, I think
That's good constructive.
that is. You can't drag a race while you're studying.
Caesar. He'll never let me forget that.
What?
I'll put in a plug for, in looking over some of the resumes that have been sent back on the history or what the people are doing, a number of the ladies are homemakers. And I think that's one of the most
Oh,
noble
you bet, boy.
professions.
You know, there's an
possible.
old Pennsylvania Dutch statement that says, if your house is clean and the meals are on the table, you have a happy marriage. I like that one. Of course, you know, the feminists out there will say, well, guys, clean that house and
Learn to cook.
and you'll have a happy marriage.
those
No
pies.
problem
I'm
whatsoever.
not discrediting any of the other
No, we
professions
certainly
at all.
don't. We have a couple more minutes left, and I would like to have you look at whatever you have in front of you to give us, you had mentioned those letters that you got. Do you have many of the letters that came?
I brought some.
Go
I
ahead,
don't know.
Nancy.
Why don't you look at this and let me tell you about this.
Okay.
This is the same cover we have used at every reunion. It's done by Jill Reese.
Jill Lauer? Jill Lauer.
She has done this for us every year. And we've had, a reunion every 5 years, am I correct?
Well, since the 25th we did.
Yeah. And before then, I can't remember if we did have, but we've used the same cover. She does a nice job. She does them all by hand.
Where's Jill now?
She's in Wadsworth. She lives out on Mennonite Road.
Mennonite Road. What is her married name?
Reese.
Reese.
Yeah. So we always appreciate the work she does. She does all this by hand. Hand stencling. So.
Now, the 1949, what significance does that have to your own personal life?
That's my telephone
Your
number.
telephone number, 6?
4.
334.
Always think the first phone system, 334. 1949.
1949. You won't change that for anything.
No, I got the best phone number in town.
That's right. And who are some of the people who wrote back and told us what we're doing?
Well, we've got, let's see here. Most everybody is looking at some long years of marriage and several children and grandchildren. We have several that had great-grandchildren, not a lot. I think that the tops in family is Frances Brubaker, and she's not married, but she has 11 nieces and nephews, 24 grand and 9 great-grandnieces and nephews.
Now, Frances never married?
No.
Frances is never
For heaven's
married,
sakes, and what a lovely girl.
and I'm not sure of the number of great-grandchildren who had the most, Glenn. I haven't gone through this yet completely, and so. But a lot of people have been married in the 40 years and have
30s,
had
40s.
Yes, long.
We have at least 2 in our class who have been married more than 50 years. So that means that they
Married right out of high school.
instead of putting on their wedding dress, they just went with their graduation gowns and
He got married.
got married. What were some of the outstanding things? Anything surprising? In our class, Levi Mills had purchased a big golf course, and it now is part of a city in California. So
I really haven't spent enough time going over all of these to
I don't think there were any big surprises.
No,
We had some very successful people in our class.
and who are some of those people?
Well, Jim Blau was one,
Yeah.
Mickey Tanner, and some of the ladies in our class. Some of the gals have done Elsie Taylor.
Elsie Taylor, yes. So she's married to Mervyn Kilmer.
Right, and
Minister.
they've had a very fruitful life.
Yes.
And add
John
to
Cook
it.
became a minister, did he not?
Yes, I think he
John
did.
Cook's the minister?
And I think
Milton-
Roy Bindle is too, isn't
Roy
he?
Bendel?
Roy Bindle?
Vahey.
Who?
Milton Vahey.
Del
Yeah.
Vahey, of course, he
Yes.
was a Salvation Army
Yes.
son, wasn't he?
Right, yes.
Commander's son, and
Yeah.
I think he is a minister also in New York State.
Of course,
We had 3 or 4
Roger Bishop became a college professor.
Roger became a college professor. His brother became a minister. He was a minister. We have Mervyn Kilmer and Roger Bishop, who are ministers in our class.
One of the humorous anecdotes, that one of the messages that was sent back from a classmate was from Nick Burliak.
Oh, and what did Nick have to say?
He says, "Don't die before I do. I can't take it."
We have lost 15 by death that we know
We
of.
have 20 in our class that are gone. We had a very small class. How many were in your class?
97.
You had a smaller class than ours then.
97.
We had 111 or 12 or 15 or something like that.
And I think we have remained close, don't you?
I would.
And we have these reunions and everyone is just tickled to death to see
Yes.
everyone.
Oh, they are. And
mean,
one of the
we're-
things that came out of our reunion, and I hope it comes out of yours as well, it's the best reunion they've ever had because everyone now was himself or herself.
Yes.
No more airs, no more
No
flex,
cattiness, no
nothing like
no,
that.
right,
We
right.
got together and we had an absolutely glorious time, and I
Yeah, we
certainly
did
hope
too.
that you people have yours. Where are you going to have your reunion?
At the Ramada Inn on Saturday evening, and then Friday evening we'll have a very informal time that we've had several reunions, and we had that at the Party House at Great Oaks, and that has been very successful. But the main dinner will be on Saturday night.
And then on Sunday you go with the class of 1999.
And I think there's a brunch planned
We're
too.
planning a
We're having a
brunch,
brunch too. And where was that going to be?
probably down at Mike's.
Down
Yeah.
at Mike's on the Square. We have
We,
30 seconds left. What else do you want to say about the class of 1949?
Well, I guess we're the last class in this century to be honored as the 50-year class.
That's right. And how about you, Glenn? Anything you want to say?
Just quickly, there's a group of centralized students that have got together over the years, and they're also planning a get-together Saturday noon.
Oh, that's great. That's a good one. Nancy, quickly.
Norm Simler made a statue that we presented to the school. And do you remember, it was like a 49er? And he made a plate on it, and I always thought that was a nice gesture.
Thank you very much. The class of 1949 celebrating its 50th anniversary. Glenn, Ed, and my dear friend, what's her name?
Nancy.
Nancy, thank you very much.